auditors assess these controls later. Don't worry. But this whole phase is about the fact that auditors need to document their understanding of internal controls. And there are 4 ways that the auditors can do that. What is one of the ways that auditors document their understanding of internal control questionnaires? So the internal control questionnaire is literally a list of questions, right, that the auditors prepared. And if the client answers yes to this internal control questionnaire, that means that there are controls present. If there's a no answer, that means that there aren't controls present, right? Like, does someone compare sales orders to sales invoices prior to recording a yes? There's a control present. No, there's no control that's present, right? So what would be the benefit of having an internal control or doing an internal control questionnaire? Internal control questionnaires are the most efficient way to understand and document clients' internal controls for the audit. The most efficient in terms of the type of procedure, in terms of collecting evidence. Yes. So that's the disadvantage of this we're about to get to, right? So doing an internal control questionnaire is the most efficient way to document your understanding, right? We're not testing controls yet, so there's no evidence to be collected on it. Does it necessarily, what is the disadvantage of doing an internal control question? You don't really get a lot of evidence. So this is the most efficient way, but remember, we're not testing controls yet. The auditor is just trying to understand what they have, right? The limitation could be in the way that the questionnaire is written. Because the auditor is the one that writes the questionnaire. What if they leave something off? What if they write it such that there is a mistake in your book, at least it was the last edition, where they wrote something where the answer was supposed to be no, and it's like, it should be written so that all the answers should be yes. Because a no should indicate a issue, right? One of the weaknesses, again, because we're just talking about understanding and document, it doesn't tell you if there is a necessarily, even if there's a yes answer, it does not tell you if that control is actually working. It's just telling you that there should be one, that there's one design, right? Let's come back to that. So first one was internal control questionnaire. Well, number 2, it's another one. Ready? A flow chart, right? And so a flow chart is basically, again, if you pull up the revenue cycle, those slides, you'll see the very beginning of that, you have a flow chart. And what are some of the advantages of flow chart? Okay, it gives you the main idea because you can see kind of the full picture a little bit. So when you look at a flow chart, it's easy to identify where the key control points are, right? If there is a line that goes from purchase order to purchase order approval, you know that there should be a control there. There should be some sort of policy that says that somebody needs to approve this, right? It's easy to identify where the control points are. The weakness to flow charts is they take forever. They take a long time to put together. Remember working for Nestle, and we had to do a flow chart of the accounts receivables and accounts payable processes, and it took us a year. Like it can be, I'm sure it'd be faster now, right? But it did take a really long time, right? But the advantage is that it's easy to identify the key control points, right? Which for an auditor is helpful because it can help them identify where controls might be missing. So that's 2. We've got internal control questionnaires, which are the most efficient way to understand and document internal control processes. And then we have flow charts, which are the advantages that they tend to easily identify key control points. So what's the third? Daniel? Narrative description. Now we're going to come to what Anthony was pointing out earlier. So a narrative. What's a narrative basically says, and I remember doing this as an intern for PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was right when the SOX Act had just kind of, dating myself, the SOX had just kind of happened, and we had to do a lot of what's called 404 work. basically understanding, documenting internal controls. So I was doing a by-state bus audit, and I had to sit down with, I think, accounts payable, and literally sit there with her and ask all day, like, what do you do? Because every procedure that that person does is a control. So you're just sitting and writing. And then what do you do? Right? And then what do you do? So what would be the advantage of a narrative? Remember, we're still talking about understanding, not testing yet, but understanding what. So it definitely is going to be more detailed, right? Like you're going to get a full picture of their process if you write down every single like thing that they do. Ready? Now, it also can tell you where there might be some areas where there could be missing controls or risk like that. What could be a disadvantage? Ready? I'm sorry. That's kind of what they're hinting at, but one of the biggest issues for auditors when it comes to understanding, right? So let's say I'm the one who goes to Alex and I write down his entire processes, right? For the rest of my team to understand where the control weaknesses might be, they have to read this huge narrative, like this novel, this book, right? So one of the disadvantages is that it's not easy to identify where the control deficiencies might be. Like imagine if you have to flip through an entire book to kind of like, okay, I mean, where could it? Versus the internal control questionnaire, you see a no answer and you're like, yeah, there could be a problem there, right? So narratives are very comprehensive, right? However, it's not easy to identify potential weaknesses in a timely fashion. The fourth way to understand and document was a little bit further in your book because they don't put it in the section, but I do. And it's called a walkthrough, right? They kind of put it in the testing section. I put it here because really when an auditor is performing a walkthrough, they're trying to understand what is happening, right? They literally are walking through and seeing the different processes happen, different policies happen, different transactions happen, right? So they can ask questions on this walkthrough, they can document, right? But a walkthrough is really, right, it's a combination of inquiry and observation. Ask questions, you're watching, right? And then you document. Now, if you do some tracing and vouching during this walkthrough, yeah, you're collecting evidence, but for the most part, it really helps the auditor to understand and document the client's internal control process. When they walk through, right, the different transactions, when they observe the transactions actually happening, when they are asking questions, right? And that's called a walk.